Ever found yourself giving everything to someone who doesn't appreciate your worth? That's exactly where I was when I realized the man I loved was secretly judging me for my past. This is the story of how I went from feeling defeated to reclaiming my power one PS5 at a time. It's funny how life works sometimes. Mike was never supposed to be anything more than a passing figure in my life, a name mentioned by Julia, my then best friend, during our endless coffee dates. Julia had been dating Mike for a while, and though I'd never met him at the time, her stories painted a picture of someone charming, grounded, and funny. But back then, he was her boyfriend, so he was simply off limits, both in my thoughts and in reality. Then everything changed. Julia and I had a falling out. It was messy, the kind of argument that leaves you questioning years of friendship. We stopped talking, and soon after I heard that she and Mike had also broken up. At the time, it didn't mean anything to me. Life had moved on, or so I thought. Months later, I ran into Mike at a mutual friend's game night. It was one of those evenings where you expect nothing and leave feeling like the universe had other plans. We hit it off almost immediately, laughing over the absurdity of certain board game rules and bonding over our shared love of obscure indie films. The connection felt effortless, natural. Still, there was a voice in the back of my mind reminding me of who he was. Julia's ex, it whispered, like a warning. But as days turned into weeks, and our conversations grew longer and more intimate, that voice became quieter. Eventually, Mike and I became something more. At first, it felt like fate, two people finding each other in the chaos of life. But even then, there was a part of me that wondered, is this too good to be true? Before I go any further, let me tell you a bit about my past, because it's important to understand why the events that followed cut so deeply. In my early 20s, I dated Jake, my first real boyfriend. He was kind, a little awkward, and completely inexperienced when it came to relationships, just like me. We had fun together, but it didn't take long to realize we were on different paths. We broke up amicably, or so I thought. Then came Adam. He was charismatic, confident, and everything Jake wasn't. I fell hard and fast. But what I didn't know was that Jake and Adam were close friends. By the time I found out, it was too late. The damage was done, and I became the girl who dated two friends. The fallout was brutal. I was called names, whispered about, and treated like I had no right to move on. It didn't matter that I hadn't known they made me out to be the villain. That reputation followed me for years, shaping how I saw myself and how I thought others saw me. When I met Mike, I thought things would be different. He knew about my past, but he never seemed to judge me for it. He told me he loved me for who I was, not who I'd been. For 4 years, I clung to that belief. But as I would soon learn, even the people closest to you can hide their true feelings. Mike's 29th birthday was coming up, and I wanted it to be special, something that would show him how much I cared. He'd been dropping hints for months about how much he wanted a PS5, but could never justify buying one for himself. Mike wasn't the type to splurge, and I admired that about him. I decided I'd save up and surprise him. But saving for the PS5 wasn't easy. As a freelance graphic designer, my income wasn't exactly stable. Every week was a balancing act between bills, groceries, and unexpected expenses. I started cutting back on everything: no more weekend takeout, no more impulse buys, and definitely no more overpriced lattes. Every time I set aside a few dollars, I thought about how excited Mike would be. I pictured the look on his face when he opened the gift, the way his friends would cheer him on, and how proud I'd feel for making it happen. This wasn't just about the PS5, it was about showing him how much he meant to me, about proving that I could put him first. After months of scrimping and saving, I finally had enough to buy it. I wrapped it carefully, the anticipation building with every piece of tape I placed. In my mind, this gift symbolized the strength of our relationship, the years we'd spent building something solid. But looking back, maybe I was trying to prove something not just to Mike, but to myself. I wanted to believe our love was worth every sacrifice. I never imagined how quickly that belief would be tested. The night of Mike's birthday party, I was buzzing with excitement. I carried the gift into his apartment, smiling as his friends gathered around, the atmosphere electric with laughter and chatter. Mike was in the kitchen, pouring drinks, but when he saw me walk in, his face lit up. It felt like the kind of moment you see in romantic comedies, where everything feels perfect. When it came time for him to open the gift, I could barely contain my excitement. Everyone gathered around as he tore off the wrapping paper. The room erupted into cheers when they saw the PS5, and for a brief moment I felt like the hero of the night. But then Jessica spoke. Jessica was one of Mike's co-workers, a sharp-tongued woman who always seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. She leaned back in her chair, her voice dripping with mockery as she said, "Wow, Mike, I didn't think you were into low standards." The laughter stopped. My heart sank. I looked around, hoping someone would say something, but all I saw were awkward smiles and averted eyes. Then I turned to Mike, expecting him to come to my defense. But he didn't. He chuckled nervously and said, "Come on, Jess, don't be mean," as if her comment had been some harmless joke. His lack of reaction hit me harder than Jessica's insult ever could. I stood there, feeling exposed and humiliated, as if the entire room had been let in on some unspoken secret about me. That was the moment the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. After Jessica's comment, everything felt off. The playful banter that had filled the room earlier now seemed distant, and the laughter sounded like static in the background. I was trying to hold myself together to keep my composure, but it was impossible. My stomach twisted with anxiety, and every part of me wanted to leave that party and never look back. But instead, I stayed. I watched Mike interact with his friends, as if nothing had happened. He was laughing, enjoying the attention, and completely oblivious to the hurt I felt. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it's just a bad joke, I thought. It doesn't matter that much. But deep down, I knew it did. I spent the rest of the evening trapped in my head, replaying Jessica's words over and over. By the time the party started winding down, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I pulled Mike aside, away from the group, and confronted him. "Why didn't you defend me?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. Mike looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected this reaction from me. "Amber, come on. It was just a joke. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" His words hit like a slap. Just a joke? That was all he had to say? "Mike, it wasn't just a joke," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was an insult. And you didn't even try to stand up for me. I thought you cared about me, but you didn't even think I was worth defending." Mike sighed, clearly irritated by the confrontation. "Amber, you're overreacting. I didn't want to make things awkward at my own party." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't let him see how much it hurt. "You didn't want to make things awkward, so you just let her talk to me like that." His silence spoke volumes. The realization hit me hard. Mike didn't respect me. He didn't see me as someone worth defending. It wasn't just about that moment, it was about how he viewed me, how he always had. I don't know what changed in me at that moment, but something snapped. All the doubt and disappointment I had been pushing aside came rushing to the surface. I had spent so long convincing myself that Mike was different, that he was the one who could accept me, flaws and all. But he wasn't. And I was done. I turned and walked back into the living room, where the PS5 still sat, the prize I had worked so hard for. Mike was still mingling with his friends, lost in his own world, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. My hands were trembling as I grabbed the PS5 from its spot. It felt like I was holding the last shred of my dignity, something that had been handed to Mike with the hope that he would cherish it. I walked back to where Mike was standing, not bothering to make eye contact. The room grew quieter as I approached, and I could feel the shift in energy. "I'm taking this back," I said, my voice cold. Mike blinked in confusion. "What? Why?" "Because I can't keep pretending everything's fine when you don't respect me," I replied, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "You didn't even defend me, Mike. I deserve better than that." The silence in the room felt suffocating. I didn't look back as I walked out of the apartment, PS5 in hand. My steps felt heavier with each movement, but they were also empowering. I was no longer going to settle for a relationship that made me feel less than I was. When I finally made it home, I let myself breathe. I had made a decision that would change everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right. The days after the party were filled with a strange silence. I thought I'd feel a rush of relief after walking away from Mike, but instead, there was an emptiness inside me that I couldn't shake. The PS5 wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of my investment in him, in us. But taking it back felt like taking back the parts of me I had lost over the past few years. The messages from Mike started coming in almost immediately. At first, he was apologetic, asking what had happened, asking why I was blowing things out of proportion. I couldn't even bring myself to look at his texts without feeling angry all over again. How could he think this was something I was overreacting about? Didn't he see how much it hurt? I spent hours looking at my phone, staring at the glowing screen, wondering if I should respond. But every time I thought about answering, the memory of his silence at the party crept back in. He hadn't stood up for me. He had let Jessica insult me in front of everyone. And the worst part was that he didn't seem to think it was a big deal. I started to realize that this wasn't about one comment or one party. This was about a deeper issue: Mike's lack of respect for me. His words and actions over the years had built up, and that moment at the party had been the final straw. For so long, I had been telling myself that he was different, that he was the one who wouldn't judge me for my past, for all the mistakes I had made. But now I could see it clearly. He was just like everyone else. He saw me as someone disposable, someone who wasn't worth defending. The silence felt heavy, but it also felt like freedom. I realized I was better off without him. By the time I picked up the phone to call him, I was no longer the woman who had walked into his party with a gift wrapped in excitement. I was someone different, someone stronger, someone who had finally learned her worth. Mike picked up the phone on the first ring, his voice filled with that same charm I had once fallen for. "Amber, I don't understand what happened. Why are you doing this? We were fine." "But we weren't fine." I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what I knew had to be said. "Mike, I can't do this anymore. This isn't working. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me." There was a long pause, and then he laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was nervous. "Amber, come on, don't do this. We've been together for 4 years. But those 4 years had been filled with doubt, uncertainty, and a growing realization that Mike was never who I thought he was. "You don't get it," I continued, my voice firm. "It's not just about the party. It's about everything. Your silence, your dismissal of my feelings. You don't see me. You never did." Mike's voice softened, but there was a tinge of frustration behind it. "So, this is it? You're just going to throw everything away over a misunderstanding?" "It's not a misunderstanding," I said, shaking my head, even though he couldn't see me. "This is me standing up for myself, Mike. I deserve to be with someone who values me. I'm done." With that, I ended the call. There was no dramatic closure, no tearful goodbye. Just a quiet, powerful decision to finally put myself first. It wasn't easy, but walking away was the best thing I could have done for myself. I wasn't going to settle for being treated less than I deserved. I had taken control of my life, and for the first time in years I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. After ending things with Mike, I thought I'd feel like I was missing something, like I had made a huge mistake, or like I was going to regret walking away from someone who had been such a big part of my life. But surprisingly, that wasn't what happened. The first few days were hard, no doubt. There were moments when I would pick up my phone to text Mike, only to realize I had no reason to anymore. The silence between us felt overwhelming, like the weight of everything I hadn't said to him had suddenly become too much to bear. But I started to find comfort in that silence. I spent more time focusing on myself. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned: painting, reading, even just walking through the park with my headphones in. lost in my thoughts. I took long baths, cooked meals for myself, and started to rediscover the woman I had been before I'd lost myself in the relationship. It wasn't just about healing from the hurt Mike had caused, it was about rediscovering who I was outside of a relationship. I realized how much of my identity had been tied up in him, and how little I had done to nurture my own dreams and ambitions. Friends reached out, checking in on me, and I began to reconnect with them too. I had been so caught up in the toxic cycle with Mike that I'd lost touch with the people who genuinely cared about me. They reminded me of my worth, of the person I had been before I let someone else dictate my value. As the weeks passed, I could feel the pieces of myself coming back together. It wasn't a smooth process, and there were days when I felt the sting of betrayal, but I started to feel something else too: empowered. The strength I had found in walking away from someone who didn't respect me was a feeling I had never experienced before. I wasn't just healing, I was growing stronger, more confident, and more sure of who I was and what I deserved in life and love. It's funny how you don't realize your own worth until you're forced to face the truth. I had spent years doubting myself, convincing myself that I wasn't good enough, that I needed to be someone else to be loved. I allowed others to dictate how I felt about myself, and I thought love was about giving everything and expecting nothing in return. But the truth was, I had been selling myself short. The biggest lesson I learned was that self-worth doesn't come from someone else's approval. It comes from within. I had spent so much time worrying about what Mike thought of me, trying to make him happy, that I had lost sight of what made me happy. In trying to be the perfect girlfriend, I had forgotten to be the perfect version of myself. And boundaries? I had never really understood them until now. I had allowed Mike to disrespect me in ways I couldn't even see until after it was too late. I had let his friends, his comments, and his attitudes shape how I viewed myself. But setting boundaries clear, firm boundaries, was the most powerful tool I had. The other important lesson: trust your instincts. When something feels off, it's usually because it is. My gut told me something wasn't right long before that party, but I ignored it, thinking I could fix things or make it better. I learned that I don't have to fix anyone or stay in a situation that doesn't serve me. As I move forward, I carry these lessons with me. I'm no longer afraid to walk away from relationships that don't respect me. I've learned the value of self-love and how important it is to maintain boundaries. I've learned that I deserve more than just the scraps someone else is willing to give. I deserve respect. I deserve to be seen and valued for who I am. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this: I'm no longer willing to settle for anything less than I deserve. And that's the kind of power that comes from reclaiming your life. I hope this story resonated with you. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt disrespected or unsure of your worth, I hope you can find strength in knowing that you deserve better. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and always remember to stand up for yourself. You are worth it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.